Joe, I'm an alcoholic. How's everybody tonight? Good. Sounds like everyone's charged up. Who's here for the very first time at a position neutrality meeting? Anyone never been here before? Oh, good. A whole bunch of it. Well, first of all, welcome. And second, let me warn you in advance, you're liable to experience us just a little different than other meetings of other fellowships you may have attended. The primary reason that's liable to happen is that we intend for you to have a different experience here. What we do is we take a look at the suggested instruction for a step or so a week, directly out of this book, and we use this book in Crystal Meth Anonymous. Why? The process described by the authors of this book has been proven to work with addicts of the hopeless variety, addicts to alcohol and other substances. Fair enough? Fair enough. And tonight we're going to look at 5, 6, and 7, and there's often a little mystery around the fellowship about the instruction for 6 and 7 because of the way the book's written, so we're going to try and take the mystery out. But let's get started. You guys, you know I'm not a guru on this book. I'm not here to tell you what the book says. I'm here to show you how I find what it says to me. Because this is about a personal relationship with a power greater than yourself that dwells within yourself. So if what I'm saying doesn't resonate, it's not true for you, or not yet. But if we both do our job, something will resonate tonight. And when that happens, we'll be demonstrating that oneness we talk about in all those AA meetings, right? There's one who has all power. That one is God. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to prove that power to you. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. So we're going to go to page 72 of our book. We're in a little chapter called Into Action. How many of you figured out that it's very difficult for addicts to think their way into better acting? We often have a long history of trying to think our way into better acting, yes? Any of you had good intentions that the actions didn't show? So what AA says is we're going to tap you into power, and then we're going to suggest that you act your way into better thinking. So they got a chapter called Into Action. Does that make sense? We went from how it works into action. Okay, so now it's telling us, having made our personal inventory, what shall we do about it? So how many in here have been blessed with a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps and is working with others? Oh, a good percentage of you. How many of you have considered at least asking somebody to help you in the process? Moved along somewhere? Okay, so most of you are in the process or have made a decision of some sort or getting ready to make a decision. Okay, fair enough. All right, so we've been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with our Creator, and to discover the obstacles in our path. Is that what you've been trying to do? Did you know that that was what this was about? Nope. A new relationship with Creator. The manner of living is a suggested program of recovery which introduces us to a power greater than ourselves, dwelling in ourselves, that I have lost consciousness of. And so I've got a process for revealing to me that power through me if I'll follow the suggestions. Does that make sense? So the reason if you don't have good spiritual beliefs, you believe, if you're atheist or agnostic, like half the first, the original fellowship, the experience will change your mind. We're not trying to give you a theology, we're trying to give you a relationship. Why would I want a new relationship with Creator based on their experience? Creation reflects how I'm thinking and feeling. It doesn't cause it. That's what they prove through their experience. So if I'm having a shitty time in creation, I might want to check in with Creator. Does that make sense? Yes. And it's only suggestive. If you got here on a winning streak, c'est la vie. Right? Okay. All right. So we have admitted certain defects, and we've ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We've put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. So what is the trouble in a rough way? Those of you that have taken an inventory. Various manifestations of self driven by fear. Any of you discover that? Yes. Did you find that you had some resentments that you thought were hurting others and found out they were killing you? Yes. Did you find that you treated people badly in relationships and got some of that shit back on you? Yes. That's usually so. In a rough way, the trouble is the way I think. Right? Okay. So now these are about to be cast out. This requires action on our part, which when completed will mean that we've admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. So when we talk about God in 12-step recovery, what are we talking about? A sensory experience of power, peace, happiness, and a sense of direction flowing into us. What we were introduced to in 2. Yes, that's the power that I asked to empower me. How am I going to do a fearless moral inventory when my fear is not gone? I'm going to need a power greater than me to overcome the fear. That's the first act of faith that I'll embark on, is to look inward instead of outward for my happiness. Does it make sense? It should make sense. If it doesn't make sense, say, Joe, that doesn't make any fucking sense. And okay? All right. All right. So this brings us to the 5th step in the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter. So they told us how it works. Now they're going to get down to details of what we do and why we do it and what we experience as a result. Fair enough? Okay, this is perhaps difficult. How many of you looking at the step on the wall are like, yeah, I ain't telling that to nobody. So we acknowledge that. We acknowledge that. You've encountered power to overcome fear already. So the next act of faith is you've already taken a look at it. Now you're going to discuss it with somebody else. Yes? How many of you were already, when you went through your inventory, were sitting with someone else while you did it? That's a pretty common experience. Yeah. Okay. So especially discussing our defects with another person. We think we've done well enough in admitting these things to ourselves. How many of you have had that thought? Yeah. How many of you proved yourself wrong? Okay. There's doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. So number 1, it's a book of experience. How does one find that solitary self-appraisal is insufficient? They tried it several times, and they proved to themselves that it wasn't a good practice for them. So if you try it and employ it, don't beat yourself up. That's what we all do. That's why they wrote it down. No one's trying to convince you. You'll convince you. Your ego against your spirit. If you'll strengthen your spirit, the spirit will win. The ego will come down. You'll live free. Does it make sense? Yes. Okay. All right. So many of us thought it necessary to go much further. We'll be more reconciled to discussing ourselves with another person when we see good reasons why we should do so. So would you like to hear reasons before you do something that's really kind of objectionable? Yes. Of course, we all would. This is the logical reason why learned people should believe in God. That's why the whole book is about, whether you're atheist, agnostic, or a believer dying in your addiction, you're obviously not putting into practice the tenets of your faith. So what we want to do is we're going to introduce you to power, tangible power, and you can improve consciousness of it, right? It's logical. So it's always supposed to be, you can't move into a conscious relationship based on being tricked. Right? I can't fully concede to my innermost self based on a lie, which is the first step in recovery. Yes? Okay. The best reason first, if we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. So the first thing to consider is, did you come here to overcome your addiction? Or did you come here just to rest? How many of you came here just to rest for a while? Didn't even know you were here just to rest. I'm serious, I think. So if you want to overcome your addiction, you might want to pay attention. And if you're here just playing, it's your health. Right? Okay. All right. So time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. How many of you have done that? Any of you newcomers of less than 30 years, how many of you have tried to keep certain facts about your life on the down low? Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they've turned to easier methods. Almost invariably, they got drunk. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. Have you ever had that experience? Yes. I was doing everything I thought I was supposed to do, and still, I'm spun like a monkey again. Did anyone ever tell you there is no rest of the program? If you're walking around telling people you've completed your steps, then you need to quit sucking my air. It's a manner of living. I have agreed in 3 to advocate for my brother and sister as long as I have a breath. If I'm drawing a breath, I'm supposed to be advocating for others. End of story. So if you've stopped somewhere, you never completed the rest of the program. There's no way to complete the rest of the program. Does that make sense? You will know when you've completed. We'll attend your celebration of life. Okay. We think the reason is they never completed their house cleaning. How does one complete their house cleaning?
By telling it to someone else.
By using it to help another, right, Teresa? Yeah. by taking what I thought was a wasted life and converting it to something useful for a brother or sister, to explain to them the grace that extended me and brought me to this point. Yes? So the house cleaning isn't simply inventorying it and stacking it in the corner. It's taking the power out for a walk now. Okay? They took inventory all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they had lost their egoism and fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves. They put thought in italics. Why do you imagine they did that? Where's the main problem of the addict? Sinners in the mind. More grave than that, we wrote books. People have done all kinds of things telling people how to think or act their way into a different state of being. It is not possible for a human to think or act their way into a state of being, because a state of being is absent self. So as soon as you become self-aware, you're out of the state of being. Any of you ever did something that you thought, my, that was humble of me? Did you notice how your humility vanished? There's lots of examples, but you see what I'm saying? It's tricky shit. You need a power greater than you because you need to operate in that state of being, free of the bondage of self, which is the sensory prison I live in. Why do you think I've got a vital sixth sense? Because I'm bound by the five senses that keep me entrapped in this flesh. Without that sixth sense, I believe the lies of perception. Any of you ever believed a lie of perception? Yeah. Cause your own suffering? Yeah. How many times today? Hence the manner of living, right? Okay. So, but they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary until they told someone else all their life story. The word all is in italics. Why do you think they did that? Do you think they're talking about the perfect tale? Or how many of you learned that you didn't even know how to tell the story of your life until you looked at the facts about you, armed with the facts about you, started telling about how one part of your life that you thought was a waste had now prepared you for a very purposeful existence, and now you've got all this existence in front of you. See, I haven't lived out all my life. That's why I can't tell it all in the fourth step. I've got to tell it all in the 12th step, the big amends. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. More than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. Any of you relate to that? Yeah. Crystal meth addicts, you're allowed to have more than a double. Motherfuckers, you got two on any given day. Okay. He's very much the actor. The outer world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but knows in his heart he doesn't deserve it. So how many of you have had the sensory experience of having a persona in a group or whatever, the idea people held about you? You knew you didn't deserve it because you knew how you thought and acted, and you found yourself in a condemning state, isolating, beating yourself up, pulling away. Yeah, that's what happens to us. And with addiction, that's infinitely grave. Because then we just go saturate in our thoughts where the main problem is. Any of you ever done that? Yeah. The inconsistency is made worse by the things he does on his sprees. So how many of you have had sprees? How many of you stone cold sober have had sprees? Spending sprees, other behavior we don't want to go into sprees. Coming to his senses, he's revolted at certain episodes he vaguely remembers. These memories are a nightmare. He trembles to think someone might have observed him. As fast as he can, he pushes these memories far inside himself. He hopes they'll never see the light of day. He's under constant fear and tension. That makes for more drinking. Think about why that is now, based on what you already know from your step experience. Where is the power found? Deep down inside. What's it obscured by? Calamity, pomp, worship. Every time I've been pushing that garbage down on my consciousness of the power until the light's extinguished. Somebody, who felt that? There's a whole bunch. We had an energy blast in here. That didn't come from up here, that's happening in you. We're proving the power to you through you. Does it make sense? Okay, so it does make for constant fear. And did you notice how you get in thought and emotional loops when that happens? Yes. So you don't have to take a drug to be in the addictive cycle. I crave an outcome in the world. And I obsess about how I think it'll make me feel. And I'll stay in that loop and deny what is, even when it's not in my best interest to do so. Any of you ever done that? I'll even make it your fault. That'll give me some comfort, but I'll still fuck it up, right? All right. Do you understand why it's a discipline, why it's a constant walk in consciousness, the best of our ability, right? Okay. All right, so psychologists are inclined to agree with us. We've spent thousands of dollars for examinations. So how many of you have spent either your money or the insurance company's money or somebody's money on psychological evaluations? Okay? Well, did you tell them the whole truth? No. Did you follow their advice? No. We know but few instances where we've given these doctors a fair break. We've seldom told them the whole truth, nor have we followed their advice. Congratulations. You know that path? Rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. You're square on it right now when you own that shit. Unwilling to be honest with these sympathetic men, we were honest with no one else. Small wonder many in the medical profession have a low opinion of alcoholics and their chance for recovery. They also explain to you there why people who want to help people in addiction do not share their opinion. Not because it's a rule, but as a class, we have spent thousands of dollars for informed medical opinions, have lied to get those opinions, and ignored the results of those opinions. So if we come into the rooms and somebody who is not informed tries to inform us, we're not likely to take that advice. But I will, by observation, see they're living a better life. I'll ask them how they're living a better life, and they'll show me, and I have a shot then. Does that make sense? Okay. We must be entirely honest with somebody if we expect to live long or happily in this world. Do you expect to live long or happily in this world? Do you hope to live long or happily? If you don't have an expectation yet, would that be like cool if you could do it? How many of you just take happily and fuck long? So any part of that, so they said there was a requirement. I must be entirely honest with somebody. Who are they talking about? With me. I have to fully concede. There are no secrets in the realm of the spirit. So I'm not keeping a secret from anybody but me. Does that make sense? Some of you are internalizing that. Who's feeling that? Okay. All right. So we think rightly and naturally, we think well before we choose the person or persons with whom to take this intimate and confidential step. So how many of you were afraid of who you were going to pick to help you because you didn't know who you could trust your secrets with? Okay, that's common. So it says rightly and naturally, right? How many of you finally found somebody, and when you did, you started blurting out your story before you... So you will know, won't you? Yeah, we will know, typically. Not because someone told us, because we knew at that moment that's where we were supposed to be. It would help if you were hanging around with people who knew what they were doing. But, you know, it's your life. Whatever. Those of us belonging to a religious denomination which requires confession must, of course, will want to go to the properly appointed authority whose duty it is to receive it. So if you come from a religious tradition that requires confession, they're not suggesting to not do your AA stuff or not do your religious stuff. They're saying add your religious practice to your AA practice. Because the AA practice will enhance your religious practice. And the religious practice may be inadequate to get you the full benefit of the AA practice. Do you understand that? The principles of the Oxford group were not intended to sober up drunks. That was the Anglican Church around Oxford around the beginning of the last century, and what they were trying to do was make Christians better Christians. So we're not trying to turn you into Christians, but we are trying to teach you the reality about your existence and the power that can be found within you. And so we use those practices. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so though we have no religious connection, we may still do well to talk to someone ordained by an established religion. Any of you ever wanted to do that or worked with someone who wanted to do that? Those of us that work with people that have issues in the courts, often they want it to be protected by the confessional. So it's cool, right? Okay, we often find such a person quick to see and understand our problem. What is our problem? Self-driven by fear and all its manifestations. So they may know that, they may not know that, yes? They may not know the whole manner of living I'm after. All right, of course we sometimes encounter people who do not understand alcoholics. Have you ever done that? Yes. How many of you encountered them in places you didn't think you would? like the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. You'll know who they are. They'll say things like, you get a year, then I'll sponsor you. You know why you're not getting well? You're not willing. Willingness is divine power. Of course they don't. You're going to have to love them until they experience the power, then they'll develop willingness. You got to give them a reason to live before the one in them that wants to live is going to make the effort to live. It's just a fact. Any of you have been around here a while, you know what I've seen. You've seen it too. People surprise us. We think people are squared away and they're not, and we think people are a fucking mess, and here I am. Wasn't anybody placing bets on me, I can assure you. Okay. If we cannot or would rather not do this, we search our acquaintance for a closed-mouth understanding friend. You guys that are sponsoring, that's what you're hoping to grow into, is a closed-mouth understanding friend. You're going to need that understanding you're receiving. You notice how that's a progressive understanding. Okay. As we understood, I'm always in past tense. The God I understood yesterday, not the God I understand today, because I'm receiving divine understanding. Yes? Okay. Perhaps our doctor or psychologist will be the person. It may be one of our own family, but we cannot disclose to our wives or our parents anything to our wives or our parents which will hurt them and make them unhappy. We have no right to save our own skin at another person's expense. Such parts of our story we tell to someone who will understand yet be unaffected. So understand what? Unaffected by what?
What we're doing is search for the truth.
Understand that I'm in the search for the truth and not affected by the truth. Because before I get to the truth about me, I'm going to peel away layers of onion of truth in my flesh that may be disturbing to some. Any of you have some disturbing parts to your story? Still to you? Yeah. The rule is we must be hard on ourselves, but always considerate of others. Notwithstanding the great necessity for discussing ourselves with someone, it may be that one is so situated there is no suitable person available. So I would say to you, ask yourself if you think that's true in Phoenix, Arizona today. Probably not, but if you're in lockup in county, it can be very difficult to feel comfortable enough to put anything on paper. Right. Yes? Yes. And other places in lockup, and maybe you're just sitting in your chair at home and you're afraid to put anything on paper. And we're dealing with your fear, not mine. I don't need to pour mine on you. So if you don't think you need the freedom or you can't come up with it, then we'll figure out. Does it make sense? Well, you're going to have to check that out for why are you not doing it? Because you're not doing it because I told you. You're doing it because you know you need power. And you've already experienced it and you know you can improve consciousness of it, but you've got a step to take. Does it make sense? Okay. If I coerced you into it, what compulsion does, so you understand, when we started compelling people to come to meetings, we created resentment about the meeting. So we don't ever do that here. We sign your slip before the meeting whenever. We always have. Why? Because we start out by giving you a spiritual gift. There's the gift of trust. Do with it what you will. If that is so, this step may be postponed only, however, if we hold ourselves in complete readiness to go through it at the first opportunity. Now, how am I going to know outside of someone if they're holding themselves in complete readiness to go through with it? I'm not, am I? So it's really an inside job already because we've already encountered the power and we've made a decision based on that experience with the power. Okay? We say this because we're very anxious that we talk to the right person. So how many of you were anxious to talk to the right person and walk past a lot of right people because you were so anxious? It happens. But we're just trying to get you to see what is your specification. Are you looking for their externals or are you looking for how you feel in their presence? Because if you don't feel safe in their presence, I don't care what kind of car they drive, that's probably not the right guy. Because you're not going to be honest with them. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's not a rule. Okay. It's important that he be able to keep a confidence, that he fully understand and approve what we are driving at, and he will not try and change our plan. So there's a further job description for those of you who are working with others. Right? 3, we got a new employer. And now what we're trying to grow into is full understanding and approval of their search for the truth and not try and change their plan as that truth revealed to them. Right? That's why we're praying and meditating all the time, because sometimes the plan is really disturbing. How many of you have worked with somebody and their plan was really fucking disturbing? Ooh, that didn't go well for the last 2. Any of you had a plan to just sell the last of that ounce of dope to get set up for sobriety? I've heard that one a lot. When we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. Now they're telling us the reaction we have when we've made a decision. We waste no time. They're talking about their experience. Notice how they spoke about their experience. We waste no time when we decide. Okay? We have a written inventory and we're prepared for a long talk. We explain to our partner what we're about to do and why we have to do it. How many of you at your first attempt at an inventory would have been able to explain to your partner what you were about to do and why you had to do it? The vast majority of us could not. They learned that after they sent this book out into the country and thought people would recover on their own by reading it, and they found out that didn't work out very well. So something about impartation, human to human, is required. How many of you have discovered that you really can't read this book till someone shows you how to find your experience in it? It's a fact. Matter of fact, that's why we give it to you to read, so that when you read it and then someone helps you read it, you're like, wow, where'd that come from? Okay. He should realize that we're engaged upon a life and death errand. Most people approaching this way will be glad to help. They'll be honored by our confidence. How many of you have not wanted to ask somebody because you didn't want to trouble them? How many of you have had someone ask you for something deeply personal and you were honored to have them ask? Why would you deny another human being that experience? We're all about building each other's esteem. One of the most esteemable things a man can do is help someone who has no potential of helping him. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Some of you are feeling that. Who's feeling that? I remind you that doesn't come from the podium. That power's in you. That's what we're seeking to improve consciousness of. Okay. We pocket our pride and go to it. What does that mean? Can you see the mental picture of pocketing my pride? How many of you sat down for a fifth step and you knew all the shit you were going to sort of tell, spin a little, and not cover? I'm the only one. About 5 of us.
Didn't work out that way.
How many of you tried to hold shit back? Did you get called out on it? Do you know why we call you out when you don't spill it?
We're holding your head.
Yep, we're holding my head. You get it. What happens when they unburden themselves, a flow of the Spirit comes through the room. And it's tangible. You feel it. And when you feel it, you know they've released it. Does that make sense? How many of you heard of fifth step? No, I'm not lying to these people. So you can't lie to us without our permission. You're only lying to you. But you're sitting with another addict. And you're holding our fucking head. We need to get serious. Right? I always get serious when you hold my hip. I'm waiting for you to nod out. I'm going to get that shit out of your pocket. Once we have taken this step with holding nothing, we are delighted. So they promised their experience. What's the experience of delight? You may not feel giddy because it depends on what state you're in when you start. But how many of you did feel a little bit less burdened when you got through? Even if it was nothing but having completed some phase of what was in front of you. Okay. So now they're going to talk about a little bit more of how we recognize ourselves differently. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. How many of you realize what a miracle that is for an addict to be able to be alone at perfect peace and ease? We often were alone, but never at anything near what we would describe as perfect peace and ease, right? Because we're always thinking, what do I need to do? Where do I need to be? Who do I need to get to help me? Right? Our fears fall from us and we begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. Notice how they're not talking about concepts. They're talking about tangible experiences of power. How many of you did a fifth step and for the first time in your life had that aha moment when they pointed out to you, that's the power we call God? When you started to say prayers from then on, you at least knew you were talking to tangible presence. Changes your theology right there because you let go of your theology and you start building a relationship, does it not? Because now it's not a lie. Now it's not a doubt. I know, I felt the power flow. Does that make sense? Okay. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. If you haven't had that experience, this is the beginning, guys. If you haven't had it, ask one of us who knows. If you'll ask us to be introduced to the power will introduce itself to you through us. We don't have any say in it. It will happen. How many of you have just run into someone on the street, they started talking to you, and all of a sudden you could feel the Spirit all in the conversation? It's not theories, guys, is it? We got to talk about that. People die because they don't know that. Ease and comfort in the world without going out in the world to get it. Okay? The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. I mean, you had that happen. Got that behind me. How many of you find out that the drink problem had not disappeared and had just gone into hiding? Because we don't ever complete the manner of living. This was preparation. This was preparing my testimony. This was mirroring non-judgment. Now I'm about to go out and convert those experiences, right? And if I don't move forward, if I don't strengthen my consciousness of the Spirit through the freedom step, the fitness step of 9, I'm not going to be able to be a good witness to the guy in the dope house still dying in addiction, because I'm going to pour my fear on him. That make sense? How am I going to go to the guy in the dope house that I care about, and there he is, all spun again, and never tell him what he should do, and not discuss his faults? How's that going to happen? It's not going to happen if it's just me, is it? So if I haven't improved my consciousness, I'm not going to be a very effective 12-stepper, am I? Okay. We feel that we're on the broad highway walking hand in hand with the Spirit of the universe. So what's it feel like to be on a broad highway walking hand in hand with the Spirit? How many of you felt like you were walking on a tightrope a lot of your life? Or maybe on the razor's edge? It's got to stay right on top. Damn, that hurts, right? Yeah, so now there's a broad highway. And yes, the religious implication is that you're thinking. That's fine. This came from that teaching. Okay. So returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. That's pretty specific. Carefully reviewing what we've done. So what have we done? I said a prayer in 3, and perhaps right away embarked on a searching and fearless moral inventory of me, because the consciousness of that power and peace and happiness is not strong enough in me. And I need to get armed with the facts about me. Yes, and I know this now because I've experienced the power and I'm moving through the process. Now I've discussed it with someone else. I've felt another flow of the Spirit, which is confirmation. Yes? And now I want to make sure I've told it all, because I want the whole deal. We don't want to cut our own dope around here. Any of you ever cut your own dope? Make it last longer? Not a good plan. So now after we've had this experience of carefully reviewing what we've done, we thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better. So how many of you, once you knew that God was the subject to your experience rather than the object to your belief, all of a sudden knew the power better? You may not be assigning it a him or a her or what, but you knew we were talking about power within you that you had gained access to, and somehow you were different. A new freedom, a new happiness. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. That's pretty simple instruction, right? And carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we've omitted anything, for we're building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? That's a lot of metaphor, but let's go back to the page that contains the 12 steps, because that was the instruction. And that would be page 59, yes? Yes. So we're going to review 1. Have I omitted anything? It says we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. Dash, that our lives had become unmanageable. How many of you did cop to the whole thing and didn't know what the unmanageability was until you had a second step experience? Because they don't even talk to us about the unmanageability until the second step instruction. Have you seen that? I thought my life was unmanageable because my circumstances were unmanageable, because I'd made a train wreck of everything. But I didn't realize that my train wreck was reflecting what was going on within me, not the other way around. Any of you had that experience? So, do you want to see that? Go to page 52. I'll show you, because I don't want you thinking I'm making this shit up. That's why I put a book on it. It's a prop, so you know I'm not lying entirely. Okay, so the middle of page 52, they talk about we had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems this same readiness to change our point of view. We were having trouble with personal relationships. So how many of you had that discovery? How many of you sobered up? Still had trouble with personal relationships. How many of you figured out people were the problem? So you isolated away from people, still had trouble with personal relationships. That's how we prove the main problem centers in the mind. Any of you ever been sitting all by yourself and knew that sumbitch was somehow getting to you? We don't think we're insane. That's what kills me. We don't think we're insane. But we are people who hate ourselves because we've tried to be someone else would like, and they still don't like us. Now I hate me, and I think it's your fault. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. How many of you had that experience? Did you know that you weren't supposed to control your emotional nature? We teach people that shit. Control your emotions. No, just experience it and let it go if it's not useful to you. The emotional nature is a product of a thought life run amok. If you try and control the emotional nature, you're going to strengthen the thought, the illusion that's producing the emotion, and you're going to stay in that loop of craving and obsession until you have to get some exit, and that's when we head back to the bar or the dope house. Does it make sense? Yeah. Okay. We were prey to misery and depression, couldn't make a living, had a feeling of uselessness, we were full of fear, we were unhappy, couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. So, the idea of getting introduced to first purpose and then the power to carry that out in two, right? Fundamental idea of God is the purpose for which you were placed here. Right behind that's the great reality, the power to carry that out. And now you're going to go out and do esteemable things until you get a sense of self-esteem. And you're going to find out that your life that you thought was a waste was preparatory for the life you're living out now fully. If you'll just do the manner of living. Does that make sense?
Yes.
How many of you have had those discoveries?
Yes.
So I can be of real help when I quit telling you what you should do and tell you what I had to do in a similar situation and introduce you to the power that helped me carry that out. Does that make sense? That's why I got a third step, so I'm going to give him the credit. I can't stand up here and tell you what I did today, say sober, unless I'm lying in one. Because I'm powerless. But what I can do is what God did today to distract me from my stinking thinking. He showed me shit. Gave me stuff to do. Anyone else? Here I am. How do you like it so far? Okay. So, next we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So they've described to me my insanity in those human conditions, yes? And now I've experienced this power. How many of you didn't really believe in this power? Your mind was still blocking you, but you did concede that methamphetamines, cocaine, heroin, alcohol was a power greater than you. And at some point, once we know there is at least one power greater than us, and all those chemical powers are greater than us, we better hope that this power is true, and why would all these people claim it all these years if it weren't true? Why not give it a shot? Because we'll cheerfully refund your misery if it does not work. How many of you have had your misery refunded? Fucking A, baby. Here we go. Perhaps I overreacted. Okay. Okay, so then based on that encounter of power in 2, I made a decision. What the hell? Ever had to explain to you, what the hell? Why don't I just take the rest of the steps? I'm a train wreck. How bad could it possibly be? Based on where I find myself. You get it? Okay, that's the decision, right? And then it says, turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. I call your attention, it's been mistaught for years, God of our understanding. That's not what it says. As we understood Him. Who's we? The first 100. So I'd have to go see how they understood God. They understood God to be tangible power. Power, peace, happiness, sense of direction. If I'm not having that experience, and I'm still spinning in a theology or in complete rejection, then I haven't had a second step encounter. That's not your fault, but talk to us. Share your honest doubt and prejudice. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So based on that, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory. Why do we do that? Where do we find the power? Deep down inside. And how do we find it? Sometimes we have to search fearlessly. So the logical action to take first, having made a decision, is to go inside of me and get armed with the facts about me. What I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. Not what it was like. That's just a perspective issue. What I'm like. How many of you radically were different even though your circumstances didn't change as radically because you burned it down too good? Any of you really burn it down and end up in a shitty place? Yeah. So circumstance doesn't change as rapidly as our mental and emotional state has to change in order to get free. Okay. Okay. So then we get to 5. We've admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. And that's where we find ourselves now. We're back on page 76. Yes? Yes. So it says if we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. So are we okay with the first 3 steps? And I'm okay I didn't hold anything back in my inventory and my telling of the story so far. And if we are, then we move forward. And if we're not, then we may want to cop to it, get it down. Does it make sense? How many of you had to wait till they sat down with you the second time after you sat for an hour before you told them the whole truth? Yep. That happens. Okay. All right, so we've emphasized willingness as being indispensable. So I got to be honest with myself. Am I willing to go forward? If I'm not willing to go forward, then I need to ask for willingness, because willingness is divine power. If I had the power in my flesh to do it, why didn't I do it before I burned the whole house down? I've already been introduced to tangible power. I've had what I was like, what happened, what I'm hoping to be like in the future revealed to me. So if I'm not willing to move forward now, I'm going to need power greater than me operating through me to do that, aren't I?
Yes.
The reason people think there's no instruction here is they don't know how to read the book. They told me what was going to happen here and how it works, and then they're going to lay it out for me a little further here. But the process of letting go is offering myself to others. Does it make sense? I don't let go as an action. I let go as a concession. Basically, I quit worrying about my perspective and just constant thought of others and how to meet their needs. And if I will do that, the troubling thoughts go away. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So now they ask some more questions. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things we've admitted are objectionable? So are we ready? How many of you discovered some things about you that were objectionable? How many of you discovered some things about you that were valuable? How many of you had them twisted up? Sometimes we think what's valuable isn't as valuable in spiritual delivery. You guys know what I'm talking about? I started working with people with serious mental illness at one point in my recovered life, and I thought I was quite witty. And when you sit in a room full of people with serious mental illness and you're witty, I had one come up to me and he said, "Why are you making fun of us, Joe?" And it crushed me. I had no intention, but he had no way to receive what I was dishing. So what I thought was an asset was not an asset. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Am I helping you understand how we can get confused what an asset is versus... That's why it's not up to us. We don't go out and work on our defects of character. You ever heard that shit? You ever said it? If you're out working on your defects of character, you're putting a fine shine on them. You can't think or act your way into a state of being. You only be in a state of being. But if you're constant thought of others and how to meet their needs, you perceive their need easier than your own. Have you ever sat with somebody and you have been tied up in knots and you found yourself explaining to them what they might want to do to process out of it and realize that instruction was for you?
That's it. Every day.
It happens, man. It's like, who said that? Okay. Can you now take them all, every one? Look at how they're preparing me spiritually. Anytime there's a question mark in this book, they want you to go inward. Eyesight without insight is spiritual blindness. So anytime they put a question mark, they want me to go inward and get full knowledge of myself. The only way that's going to happen is go to where the power's found. How many of you found the power thought more of you than you thought of you? At many times in your life. It's tangible power. It's not a theology. If you're not there, we'll introduce you to the power. How many of you should have been dead in your estimation and did not get dead? So the power thought more of you than you thought of you. Okay, fair enough. All right. So if we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. You see, I didn't make that up. Willingness is divine power. The prayer I'm going to be asking for earnestly now, if I'm honest with myself, I'm not willing, then I'm going to ask God to give me a shove. Does it make sense? Okay, so then it says, when ready, we say something like this. Now remember, with prayers, they're suggestive. So if you don't talk in King James language, or you don't like any of that, write your own. Same as they told you in 3. You'll notice in 3, there is no amen, because people have told us over the years that that's a prayer and this is a prayer, and no, it's not. That's the first half of the prayer. Now that my eyes are open, this is the rest of the prayer, and then there'll be an amen. I've never been asked to commit to a spiritual way of life until I was shown what my path looked like ahead of me. No one starts a journey of 1,000 miles without first counting the cost. Any of you recognize that from another book? Yes. I can't count the cost unless it's shown to me. And I'm the guy in charge of seeing what the cost is. The cost is the death of self, right? Or at least a reduction of the ego. So I'm going to have to look at what I was like, what happened, what I'd like to be like in the future, and then I'm going to do an amen now that I've seen good and bad. Does that make sense? Yeah. And once you say this prayer, you may still go out and hose it again, but it won't be as much fun. How many of you have gone out again after starting and thought, yeah, this isn't fun at all? Okay. All right. So when ready, we say something like this. My Creator, I'm now willing you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. How many of you have noticed that we really do not know, even though we profess to know, what stands in the way of our usefulness? We really don't know, do we? How many of you have had people just really rough you up and you benefited from it? How many of you have similarly had people treat you that bad and you rejected what they said entirely? So at certain points we can receive a loving touch, and other times we need a club in the face. So we really don't know, do we? What did your addiction teach you? It says we learned we fully concede to our innermost self. What did you learn? That there's a part of me that wants to live worse than the part of me that wants to die. But I had to have that revealed to me, through this process, because I'm that way. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. Now I'm asking for agreement in the Spirit. So what I bind here and what I loose here is happening, which is why it's not going to be fun when I go out and screw up later. That's why I'm going to admit promptly when I'm wrong. There's no fun to carry it. Does that make sense? How many of you know what I'm talking about, just in their own walk? And we have then completed step 7, and we've completed this week. We'll see you next week.